Welcome, folks. Today I'm going to talk about social anxiety and specifically how to heal yourself from social anxiety using a mindfulness-based anxiety reduction approach. It's a big subject in that social anxiety is a form of anxiety, and I would like very much to provide you with a comprehensive understanding of what the condition is and how it sustains itself, and of course how we heal it. I do want to start immediately with an affirmation or a confirmation that if you have social anxiety, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Nature is operating very well, and it is attempting to defend itself, and it is producing symptoms that are uncomfortable for you, perhaps unrealistic and distracting. However, it is not personal. And it's a very critical perspective to start recognizing that your social anxiety is not about you. It is about nature itself, and getting that distance on this uncomfortable situation, that psychological distance on that uncomfortable situation is going to be very helpful. It is, by the way, one of the ways to get out of this. That is stopping the personalizing of these uncomfortable, fearful-based events. Just starting from that premise, what I'm hoping to do is to turn you on to becoming interested and not thinking through not seeing and listening through the lens of what should be. And let's look at what is, recognizing that nature is operating very well in accordance to its rule, and it has resulted in social anxiety for you. Let's begin to attempt to understand social anxiety. I am going to immediately posit, and I do not mean to indict you in any sense whatsoever, the reason your social anxiety is not getting better is because maladjusted coping modes are currently in place. In other words, maladjusted coping modes are responding to the core disturbance, the core fear, and perpetuating it, not allowing it to heal up. It would integrate and heal up if these maladjusted coping modes were not in place. What maladjusted coping modes are they? Generally, they have to do with identity. They have to do with, for example, redeeming honor, looking good in the eyes of others. And I'm going to talk a little further about them. And again, I do not mean to indict you as having maladjusted coping modes. I'm careful not to indict you because, folks, the core fear generally that is at the heart of social anxiety is defectiveness, the sense of defectiveness. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you, yet you have a sense perhaps of that there is something wrong with you. You might have said to yourself at some time in your history, there's something wrong with me, or what's wrong with me? And you might be saying that today about your social anxiety. What's wrong with me? Well, that question is not necessarily only responding to the fact that you have an irrational fear. It is also an echo that may be coming from the past. Let's talk about how social anxiety might have begun. We're going to posit some ideas. I'm going to theorize some ideas. We'll need to talk about this sort of generally. Try to find yourself in this conversation. When we're kids, sometimes something happens to us in which we become worried. Think about the process of becoming worried. What does it mean to be worried? It means, for example, that you begin to think about yourself. You think about the future or you think about the past. You worry that something went wrong or that something is going to go wrong. So, from being a loose kid just flowing with life, suddenly there is an issue in your mind and you ask yourself, who am I and what can I do? Or why is this happening to me? Something negative. Now, folks, negative events happen to children all the time, and social anxiety results from some type of exposure to a form of misfortune. Those misfortunes can be, for example, having a parent who has a sense of inadequacy or a sense of irrational shame, and you could actually get exposed to that. So you get the idea, well, what's wrong? Why are we different? So you're seeing that the genesis of social anxiety is a worried kid, okay? It's a worried kid. Now there may be other, now this is not just a single event, it is actually a circumstance that continues to worry the youngster, you and me. These worries reinforce themselves. Sometimes when we worry, we think, as when we're children, we think we need to become someone. Now say, for example, that there is some issue of humiliation, some sense of inferiority. Well, the child might then consider compensating and begins to live in a fantasy. And that fantasy dissociates him or her from her actual environment. She may not like to play with other kids, she'd rather fantasize. So there's a kind of a social exclusion that begins to develop with this particular condition of being worried. Circumstances that worry us can be, for example, some type of criticism. You could have an older sibling that was critical. You may have had a guardian, an authority that was critical, or somehow, some way, you came to an unflattering view towards yourself. You may have been overwhelmed by situations and began to fantasize about being somehow super. So, these are things that children do. However, if the situation continues, what happens is that there's constant conditioning and there is a sort of disconnect with the things that are really happening. Let's think about social anxiety today, and you'll remember that when you have your social anxiety attack, you are not really receptive to the outer environment. Same thing. Same thing. You're not listening. Why aren't you listening? You're not listening to the exterior because you're listening to the interior. There is a sense of threat. And you are, reasonably, you are attending threat more than you are attending the exterior events, the social situation that's occurring. When we have social anxiety, we sort of lose our interest in what's going on outside of us. We lose interest in people. We become so defensive, we're thinking about ourselves more than we are other folks. Look at the parallel between what happens to you now when you have social anxiety and this story that I'm telling you about a kid.